Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another glorious episode of Brad's Bourbon Reviews, the podcast. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. First off, before we get into the actual show here, a few housekeeping notes. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Keep doing your reviews that you've been doing. Thank you so much for letting us hit 2,500 subscribers over on YouTube in just a few months. That was fantastic. Thank you very much. We also hit 15,000 on TikTok. That was a big blessing. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. And I always like to say thank you when something like that happens, because it's because of you guys that I get to have these cool opportunities like the one I'm about to have right now with somebody who I really admire. It is Jake Kiper from the Coming Whiskey over on Instagram. Dude, what is going on? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Had a great day at work and looking forward to hanging out for a little bit and sipping some good whiskey.
Yeah, let's do it. What are you sipping on?
All right, so I've got two bottles in front of me here. One, I have the Maker's Mark Community Batch, and then I also have the newest Owensboro Bourbon Society selection of Green River. It's a single barrel, just over 7 years in age, clocking in at 130.8 proof.
Jeez. Oh, dude, I fell in love with Green River. I have really fallen in love with their stuff. The first time I ever had their stuff, I tried their wheated bourbon, and I didn't like it. I thought it was a little... I don't remember. The review was like a year and a half ago, so I don't really even remember what I said about it. I haven't really touched it since, so I kind of wrote them off a little bit. But then I had a friend of mine tell me that they were doing some event in Orlando with a liquor store here called 5 Star, and they do really cool barrel picks. And they had a barrel pick, and they were kind of hosting a barrel pick event where the idea was you pay money, you could take the barrel home with, or the bottle home with you, and then shipping can be kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. So they didn't actually have them, but we got to try like a bunch of stuff from Green River, and dude, for my palate, I picked the only thing from Green River to be my first, that I didn't like from Green River to be my first experience, because I loved everything else. And I have a Green River single barrel pick that is so good that it is going to be in my top 10 of the year. Like, it is an unbelievable bottle. So Green River is a solid bottle.
So they are fantastic. I live in Owensboro. I'm about 10 minutes away from Green River. I challenge someone to find anyone who's a bigger fanboy for Green River than I am. I like their standard flagship products, but of the three standard whiskeys, the wheated is, I don't want to say if it's my least favorite, but it's definitely number 3 for me. I actually prefer their standard rye whiskey. That's my favorite.
Me too. And I don't like rye typically. Like, that's what they crush it.
They do. It's great. It's a 95.5, but it's not NGP. It is their rye. That is my favorite of their 3 standard offerings, closely followed by the flagship bourbon. I do enjoy the wheated, but it's definitely further down the list for me. I've been able to try it a couple of times straight from the barrel at the distillery, and in the wheat, straight from the barrel, cask strength, it's a big step up. So they do have, like I said, single barrel selections coming out probably awfully soon. And I think those are going to be extremely popular. And I'm also told they're going to be extremely limited.
So the Green River wheated mash bill cask strength is going to be like selections of that?
Yes. So, the label for the single barrel full proof, which will be store picks, popped up on the TTB website within the last 2 weeks.
Sweet.
So seeing that, I checked in with Karen, who is their national brand ambassador, a good friend of mine.
Oh, she was the one that was at the event.
Okay, yeah, Karen is great. Yeah, Karen is great. So you heard the Glen Karen talk.
Yes.
So she told me that the single barrels of the wheat are going to be extremely limited.
Ooh, interesting. Okay. Interesting. I'm going to have to do what I have to do to get my hands on one of those then, because I got to try that.
If you think that the flagship bourbon is limited right now, hard to get a hold of, the wheat, at least at first, is going to be even harder to get a hold of, but worth it.
Are they? If you can't say, that's fine. But do they have plans to like expand that in the future? And is this just like the beginning of it, or are they going to keep it limited?
I haven't heard clarification on that, but I would imagine that yes, they're going to expand it in the future. But just at least starting out, it's going to be quite limited. But I'm sure it will expand going forward.
That's awesome. Dude, what's it like living in Kentucky? I've only been up there one time to do the Bourbon Trail, and I had such a fun time. Is it cool? Do you like living there?
I like it. I was born in Kentucky and then moved away for several years as a kid and came back. I left for grad school and then willingly chose to come back.
Nice.
This is home for me. being someone who's interested in bourbon, it's a lot of fun being here. Unfortunately, Owensboro, where I am, I'm still about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes from the heart of bourbon country, which I guess for those who live further away, that sounds like I'm whining. But where I am, I'm definitely not a 30-minute drive from the bulk of all the distilleries, but it is fun being here, being part of that culture. I do love touring as many distilleries as I can, getting to talk to people on site, and I really like doing photography. And distilleries happen to be pretty picturesque places, so it's a lot of fun for me.
I got a new camera not so long ago for videos, and I bought it thinking it was just gonna be like a really solid camera for video, and then I started taking pictures with it here and there, and I'm like obsessed with it now, and like I'm turning into a photography guy, which is funny because my dad owned a photography business for a long time, and I could have learned a lot from him. He's still around, but I could have learned a lot from him in the moment and like had the knowledge already. And I just wasn't interested at all. And now I find myself going, "Hey, Dad, what do you do for like shutter speed on? If you have this lighting condition, like, what do you like?" And he's like, "You could have asked all this stuff when you were helping me when you were like 15, 16 years old. You didn't bother at all. Now that you're interested in this stuff, it's just so funny."
It's a fun hobby.
It is.
And I like taking pictures, on vacation, and just I don't like shooting people. I have no ability for that, but I like landscape. I like object. So distilleries, that's what I like doing. I like going on tours, getting to take my time, and taking something that looks ordinary or mundane, and hopefully finding that right angle that makes it look interesting.
You take great photos of column stills. I was looking at your account this morning, and I saw a bunch of. I think you posted. You posted something today about column still, or did it just come through my feed?
I posted one yesterday from
okay.
Spirits of French Lick, and then I posted one earlier today. I'm blanking out of where it was from. I have hundreds of photos camped out on my phone, just waiting to post, so that I don't completely flood my Instagram timeline at Coming Whiskey with photography. But yeah, my phone is sitting on a supply that I will never fully get posted.
It was is it Wilderness Trail? Is that
is that what it is?
Trail. Okay, yeah, I thought that's what the logo was. Yeah, dude, that's an amazing photo.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I love it.
Yeah, it's just I like finding some interesting angle that makes something ordinary look a bit more interesting.
You do a good job. That's a really cool photo. All right, so let's talk about we've had this plan for quite a while. And I've been very, very excited to sit down and talk to you because, like I told you off air, I admire what you do. I think you do great work. Your account is like invaluable. My fiance hates your account because I'm always like, "Ooh, I need that one now too."
I'm sorry. I'll tell her I apologize.
I will. Behalf. I'll pass the word. I'll pass the word along. But we're recording this. I think this will probably come out tomorrow or Monday. I might say it for Monday, but we're recording on November 14th, and we were kind of talking about this, and you made a post about it. But I want you to kind of tell the story of the significance of this date for people listening.
So, whenever I do podcasts, or when anyone does a podcast on bourbon, the most common question is always, what got you into bourbon? What sparked your interest? And for me, many years later, November 14th is that date. My father passed away from cancer when I was 10 years old on November 14th, 1992. So that's now 32 years ago as of today. And roughly 8 years ago, I was still very much a craft beer drinker at that time. Just maybe getting curious about whiskey. Living in Kentucky, not being into bourbon, that needed to change. But roughly 8 years ago, my mother said, by the way, I saved the last bottle of bourbon that your dad opened before he died. Would you like it? And of course, I wanted that bottle. It was a roughly 3/4 full bottle of Maker's Mark that was opened at some point in 1992 and was shared between my dad and his friends at some point before passing. And that bottle had been tucked deep back in a cabinet in my mom's house ever since. And holding that bottle, I'm realizing that my father and his friends held that bottle and drank from it. It was a sense of connection to my father decades after he passed away. And it sparked my interest because he loved bourbon, and I wanted to share in that love suddenly decades later. So it sparked my interest. And then from there, I realized that I didn't know much about bourbon. I knew very little about it. So I picked up a book. Picked up a book written by Clay Reisen, who writes for the New York Times and has written a couple of books. And I liked the book. It was interesting. It caught my attention. So I read another one, and another one, and another one, and it just kind of snowballed and spiraled. Well, what ended up happening, though, is as I read about bourbon, I started reading about other spirits and throughout the world, and I came to realize that bourbon history isn't bourbon history, it's just history.
Mm-hmm.
Came to be very aware of the fact that American history and world history is deeply intertwined with beverage alcohol. You can't fully tell the story of world history or U.S. history without talking about alcohol. So throughout that process, that first book has currently turned into 497 completed books.
Oh, dude.
So I knew nothing, and then my goal was I wanted to know everything. I wanted to know everything that I can. So that's kind of where my passion for it started. And kind of how a lot of this spiraled is I used to be very active on Twitter, and I started sharing bits of information that I learned from my books on Twitter. That was the whole shtick of my Twitter account, was sharing tweetable facts from my spirits books. From there, I was eventually asked to start doing reviews or book reviews for a publication called Malt Review that has since shut down. When they shut down, I was picked up by a current publication called Drink Hacker. But before that, I became familiar with the TTB website. And if you're not familiar with the TTB website, it's a federal website, and every single beverage alcohol label sold in the United States, the labels have to be submitted to the TTB website to be approved before it goes to market. Now, if you know how to use that website, it's a window into the future. It shows you every new alcohol of all kinds, but in my case, our case, American whiskey. So I got the idea that there's nothing on Instagram like this, so what's going to happen if I start posting interesting American whiskey labels that haven't come to market yet? Will people like it? And it turns out that people do seem to like it.
Yeah, I mean it's really cool. Like you said, a window into the future. Like it's really cool, and it's a cool, because I do feel like a lot of distilleries don't hype up new releases, especially small distilleries, because they don't really have the resources to do it. So for a lot of, like, I know personally, I'm friends with the master distiller and the owner of Conviction Bourbon. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you were able to, I think it was the honey that you put out not too long ago, or something. There was something you put out, and I screenshot it and texted it to them, and they're like, "That's amazing." They all love your account. So the question that I had for you was, do you ever get any feedback from distilleries like, "Can you please take that down? We don't want to have people know that yet," or is it like once it's, because that TTB website is public, I assume.
So yes, but it's very minimal. I have only had one distillery outright say, "Please don't post our stuff ever again." And I took down the label, and I've never posted it again. Oddly enough, their master distiller openly engages with my content. But someone, I guess, who runs their PR department or their marketing, whoever runs their marketing department, they were respectful about it and just said, "Please don't." There are only a handful of brands who have said, "Please take that down." And my goal is never to agitate anyone in the industry. So if they ask, I am more than happy to take it down. But as you said, where I'm getting my information from, it is public domain.
Yeah.
Anyone can access it if they know how. So, and I've been told that at first some distilleries were like, "Well, we don't know about this." But then most of them, it seems, have come to realize, hey, this is free publicity.
Yeah,
this is free advertising. It doesn't cost us a penny.
Yeah, like you get, because like your account has what, like 60,000 followers now?
No, I just crossed 25,000.
25. I thought it was thought it was more. I thought it was more than that
I
for some
wish.
reason. No, I genuinely thought you had more than that. Like that's wild.
Up to
to me.
25.
That's crazy though. Like 25,000 is nuts. Like the fact that because like here's the thing: the people that are following you are diehard whiskey fans. So like they're getting free publicity to thousands and thousands of people. I don't know what the downside would be for them.
Well, some of them have kind of said they want that moment in the spotlight.
That's fair. They want
And
to
if
be
they
the ones
ask
to
for
announce
that,
it.
I have no problem respecting that. None at all. Most of them, though, do seem to enjoy it. And I will say, when I launched the account, in my mind, it was just for consumers, to get consumers excited.
Mm-hmm.
I've since come to realize that the industry as a whole is pretty aware of my Instagram account, and that it's not just average consumers following, it's people who work in PR, it's people who work in marketing, people who work for the distilleries themselves. So it's an account that is utilized by the entire industry in every facet, and just your run-of-the-mill consumers who like to buy good whiskey.
That's crazy. That's nuts. I can't believe, like, I mean, like you said, they wanted to have that moment in the spotlight. I get it for sure. But if it was me and I had a business and I was like, you know, it's my size of conviction, they're like, that's awesome. That gets people, because like there'll be, I know for a fact, because I've done this. There's been brands that you've made a post of, and I'm like, I've never even heard of them. And then you do a deep dive, and you're like, oh, this is like really, really cool. I need to get this. So I could see why the big distilleries wouldn't want someone spoiling their announcement.
Sure.
But I also see it from the small, you know, the more craft distillers being like, this is amazing. Please keep doing it.
and I realize that there is more utility in what I do for the small distilleries. And I want to touch, you know, on the Southern Grace. You bringing up the conviction, and kind of, one, there are plenty of labels that hit TTB that I don't post. If there is something about it that is interesting and noteworthy that I think differentiates it from other bourbons, I'm going to post it. If it's not interesting at all in any way, shape, or form, I don't post it. Now, I have a local friend named James that at the time was traveling from Owensboro, where I lived in North Carolina, for graduate school, and his wife's family is from North Carolina.
What part of North Carolina did you live in when you were in grad school?
Well, no, it's my friend.
Sorry.
No, I want to say it was. I don't even remember what grad school it was part of. He's an organist, so it was something to do with music.
Okay.
But and his wife's family still lives in North Carolina.
That's where I'm from.
So he brought back some little 375 bottle of something, one of the convictions from Southern Grace, and we trade samples, and he gave me a sample up, and I thought, this is pretty good. You know, at the time, I want to say it might have still been 2 years old, maybe.
Sure, that makes sense if it was a few years ago.
But, you know, at 2 years old, it was enough that, okay, I think these guys are onto something good. They're still young, but they've got a bright future ahead. And then, of course, I start Googling, and I'm like, well, this distillery is in an old like jail or old prison. How cool is that? So that's kind of how I caught my focus on Southern Grace. So now, you know, I'm happy to post anything that I see coming up from Southern Grace going forward.
That's awesome. I have a sample that I want to send to you.
Okay.
I think it's their first. So they didn't release this bottle. I'll tell the story to you. People who listen to the show have probably ever heard me tell the story. But I was there to do this thing they were doing. It was an age progression tasting. So you get to try right off the still. You get to try what it gets watered down to before they put it into a barrel. You get to try it. I think it was 6 months, a year, and then up to 7 year. And the 7 year expression that they had was a barrel that they were going to bottle, and they went to go bottle it, and it was all gone, except like I think he said 9 bottles worth of bourbon left in the barrel. And they're like, well, what do we want to do with this? Do we want to like bottle it? And the kicker of it was by far and away. And I'm a fanboy of Conviction, or of Southern Grace, but specifically the Conviction label. I'm a fanboy hardcore. I love them. They've always been really cool to me, but the reason we became cool in the first place was because I expressed how much I love them publicly. And it's it's unbelievable. Like it was like we were enjoying all the bourbons, like really good, and then we tried the 7-year one, and it was just like, holy shit, like this is unbelievable. And so as we're leaving, one of the owners gave me a bottle of it. So I'll have to send you. It's from Barrel 456. It's their first 7-year. It's 119 proof. I'll send you a sample of it. And
I would love that. I feel like I recall posting that 7-year label, and I believe I even shot my shot hoping to get a sample of it, and didn't happen.
I got you.
So I would love a second chance at getting a sample of that 7-year from Southern Grace. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll send you some, man. Dude, I'm having a hard time. I'm like conflicted with it because I love their stuff so much anyway. But to me, like, this is a completely different flavor profile from them. Usually their stuff's usually really sweet, vanillas, caramels, like kind of traditional bourbon notes.
Sure.
But this one is like leather and tobacco, and it's insane. Sure. Like, it's so good. And I'll definitely send you some. But the reason I'm conflicted is because I love it so much. I don't know what to do with it because it's not like an official bottle. You know what I mean? So I don't know if I can include it with like bourbon of the year, because it's not anything that was like actually released. They kept the bottle for the board of directors and me. So I don't know what to do with it, but I want to know what you think about it. I'll send you some because I really want to know what you think. I adore it. I think it's one of the best bottles I have on my shelf. I'm looking at it right now and I'm kind of debating if I want to pour some out.
Well, I want to toss this out here as, again, I don't know where your listeners are based, if they're mostly based in North Carolina or if they're all across the country. But if they're all across the country, I realize we're probably talking about a small distillery that most people have never heard of, don't know it exists. Doing Cumming whiskey, I like the big distilleries as much as anybody. They're fantastic. But I really enjoy shining a spotlight on these smaller distilleries that are doing really good things that may not have the national name yet. And I realize that for many consumers, I am potentially their first exposure to some brand they've never heard of.
Yeah.
But there's something about that label that jumps out to me that says, you don't know about it yet, but you need to. Or at least this has potential to be really interesting.
Totally. It's like I'm in Florida now, but I'm from North Carolina. So I go up and visit them, and every time I'm up there I go spend way too long each day hanging out with those guys and doing content and stuff. But I think people look at it like the way that when someone finds a new band, like, oh man, I knew about Conviction when they had like 2-year-old whiskey, like, and now they've got a 7-year. I feel like people kind of look bourbon the same way they look at like that kind of stuff, where I knew that band when they were playing like open mics, and I feel like it's kind of the same thing. And I think that's one aspect of it that's really, really cool, is that there is so much of it and there's so many different stories. And I find myself, I'm a big history dork. So it's one of the reasons why I like bourbon so much. I was actually watching a documentary this morning because I'm preparing for a podcast for my Patreon, where I do like just the history of bourbon kind of in a nutshell. Is what was voted on my Patreon.
Okay.
So I was just kind of, going back and getting some dates and like, polishing up my little, my baseline script that I'm going to go off of. And I forgot what the point of it was. I was even saying just now.
You like history.
Yes, that's what it is. And so when you said, you can't tell the story of bourbon or whiskey without history. I mean, you couldn't be more accurate. I mean, like the Bottled and Bond Act alone is like historic, being the first, consumer protective thing. It had to do with whiskey. It had nothing to do with like protecting food or anything like that. So it's a really interesting thing. And that's what I love about it. I think it's really, really cool. I also didn't realize that George Washington distilled. I had no idea.
Yeah,
I found that out today.
Yeah. Washington was one of the 3 largest distillers in the United States at the time of his death.
That's so crazy. I found that out today. That boggled my mind.
And talking about George Washington, and wanting to tie alcohol in a bit of U.S. history. Before George Washington was ever elected to any kind of political office, he ran several times and lost. He lost several times. But at that point in history, treating was a common practice. Basically, you buy your voters by boozing them up. And the first few elections that Washington ran and lost, he refused to do that. Well, when he finally got elected to his first position, he said, here we go, I'm going to booze my voters up, and started buying them all kinds of alcohol, and then he won.
That's crazy.
But, we talk about, how alcohol impacts American history. Look at the Pilgrims. When we're in elementary school, we learn that the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock and went on from there. What we don't learn is that Plymouth Rock was not their original destination. The reason they got off at Plymouth Rock was because the boats ran out of beer. They ran out of beer, so they had to get off. Well, why is that important? You look at that point in world history, we still stored everything in barrels. Well, coming across the Atlantic, that long, months-long journey, if you store water in oak barrels, it spoils. That water goes bad. It contaminates across the ocean, so you can't drink it anymore. Well, the alcohol content in beer keeps the liquid viable. It doesn't spoil. So while you can drink water for a while, beer is literally safer to drink across that voyage.
Mm-hmm.
So at the point where the Pilgrims ran out of beer to drink, which was safe to drink, they had to get off the boat because they needed stuff to drink.
That's so crazy.
We don't learn that little bit in third grade as we're making our little turkey feather construction paper
with the
hats.
hand, the turkey hand.
Yeah, the turkey hand. So
do you
that's
think
the kind of history that really entices me.
Do you think that the reason they don't say things like that to children is not to it's to glorify quote unquote alcohol? What's the reasoning behind telling the truth?
Oh yeah, well I mean
it's got to be right.
Absolutely lingering prohibitionist sentiment. I mean, and I'm not saying that it's appropriate to tell a third grader, the Pilgrims got off the boat because they needed a beer. But also in this modern day context, but it's true.
Yeah.
But in this modern day context, that's a much bigger discussion. Well, why was beer so important? Well, it's because drinking water wasn't safe. Water spoils in oak barrels over a 3-month period. Well, the alcohol content of the beer kills any contamination, so it's safe. Likewise, in school, in Disney, we learned about Johnny Appleseed. Johnny Appleseed was a real man named John Chapman, traveled all over the Midwest, planting apple trees everywhere he went, beloved and popular. What we don't learn in school, what Disney didn't tell us, was that none of the apples planted by Johnny Appleseed were ever meant for eating. They were not the variety of apples that would have tasted good to eat. They were apples that were 100% meant to make hard cider and apple brandy. They were not apples we would ever want to eat. They would have been way too sharp, way too bitter, but they made great cider, alcoholic cider, and great brandy. That's why Johnny Appleseed was so popular. But Disney, you didn't tell us that part of the story.
Oh, that's so silly. That is so nuts to me. Yeah, I don't really get. I mean, I guess you probably shouldn't. Kids can't contextualize that, I guess, but
sure.
it is also a fact, and that shouldn't be. That shouldn't be.
But it is a fact. I'm not saying that should be taught in second grade, but as an adult, it's giving me a deeper appreciation and understanding for American history and world history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a big history guy. I love all that stuff. It's so fascinating, because I love those stories where you find something out that this is true, but this is why, and I didn't know that until now. And I always love when I find little tidbits like that to go back into history and kind of see it as an adult and kind of recontextualize everything is kind of interesting to me. So, all right. So, November 14th is a big day for you, is a big, important day for you. It's also a kind of important day for me, not in the same way. But it is the 2-year anniversary of me and my fiance getting engaged. Very excited about that. But I wanted to do a toast. I grabbed some Maker's Mark off of the shelf. I want to do a toast for your dad on the show. Pour one out for him, and you have some Maker's Mark there. I've got some Maker's Mark. I have Maker's Mark 101. Well, I didn't want to. I have Maker's Mark Celebrates 2024, but I respect your father. I didn't want to pour that out because I'm not a huge fan of that one. So I'm going to pour some here.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. I do like Maker's Mark 101 quite a bit. So to your father, man, do you anything to say? Anything you want to say before we take a toast here?
It's miss my dad. It's been 32 years. My whole obsession with this hobby is a tribute to him. So I would like to think that he is looking down and laughing hysterically to see where this whole tribute to him has ended up over the last couple of years.
Well, cheers to you, my friend, and cheers to your father as well. I'm going to slam some of this Maker's Mark 101. I love Maker's Mark 101.
Yeah, Maker's 101 is it's a fantastic pour. I will say this
Delicious.
community batch that I'm pouring right here, this is the first time that I probably touched this bottle in 2 years, and sweet Jesus, I forgot just how good it was.
What is the community batch? I don't think I even know what that is.
The community batch was an extremely limited production that you had to have an invitation to buy. So what this was, it is produced by Chef Edward Lee out of Louisville and the Lee Foundation. So going back to COVID, back to the early days of COVID, when bartenders were largely out of work because everything got shut down. Chef Edward Lee, the Lee Foundation, they put together a fundraiser to kind of help some bartenders out. And they worked, as I recall, they worked with 32 different clubs that had done a Maker's Mark Private Select. And they took little bits of all 32 selections and they blended them together.
Oh, that's cool.
Now, why I have access to this is one of the 32 clubs involved was my local Owensboro Bourbon Society. We are the second oldest bourbon society in the country behind Louisville. And they ended up doing 2 different editions in back-to-back years of Community Batch. And the Owensboro Bourbon Society, our Maker's Mark Private Select, was a part of both of that.
Oh, cool.
So initially they opened up purchases to members of the clubs that were involved. So I got access to that. Because it was a fundraiser, it was a tax write-off. So, I chose to spend $70 on my tax write-off. But, so it's essentially, it's Maker's Mark Private Select, but it's a blend of 32 of them.
It's like an infinity bottle of Private Select.
Yes, it is an infinity bottle of Maker's Mark Private Select, if you will.
That's so cool, man. That's a really cool story.
Yeah.
Is it in the old style of the
yes,
old one with like the gold label in the middle of the bottle?
Yeah.
Sweet.
So
I love
also kind of wanted to, I guess we didn't touch on though, but you mentioned the post that I made a couple days ago. Why Maker's Mark, though, is what it is to me. So when my mom gave me that bottle of Maker's Mark, I had a small pour of it. Oddly enough, since 1992, it was still good. But then I made this decision that I wouldn't touch the bottle again until my twin sons turned 21. They were 8 at the time. They're now 12 years old. But I said that I wasn't going to touch that bottle again until my sons turned 21. And on their 21st birthday, I would share a pour with them from their grandpa's bottle.
That's awesome, dude.
That was important to me, that on their 21st birthday, I get to do that. So in November of 2020, I summarized that story on Twitter and told it. And Maker's Mark saw it. And a couple days later, a letter shows up in the mail from Rob Samuels. And really touching letter, basically saying that they appreciated me sharing the story, talked about how much family means to them. And he said, we want to send you some bottles so that you can enjoy them now and not have to wait until your kids turn 21. So they sent one of their ambassadors to my house with some fantastic bottles, and they invited me out to the distillery. So I went that January, and it was an incredible experience. So they didn't know I was going to do this, but I shared that letter on Twitter, just because it meant something to me. And apparently the letter resonated with whiskey enthusiasts and just people in general. Because what ended up happening is it got shared over and over and over again. And as of this week, that letter has been viewed over 2 million times.
Wow.
So, and the people who kept commenting on it, most of them were not bourbon people. They were just people who saw a company that cares. They weren't people like you and I who are obsessive over this. It just struck a nerve with them, and it meant something to them. And I had numerous people say, I'm not really a bourbon drinker, but in honor of your dad, I'm going to go buy a bottle of Makers tonight. And that was the most touching thing of all, just to know that somebody felt moved enough by that letter, they went out to go buy a bottle of Makers because the company is so damn awesome.
That's amazing, dude. That's a great story. Wow.
So Makers definitely has a special place in my heart, and they always will.
Yeah, I can see why. That's a really cool story, man. That is awesome. It sucks that you have to have that story because of the circumstances around it, but it's an amazing story, and I'm glad that you have a cool story like that. That's really cool, dude. All right, let's transition into something else a little different here.
Okay.
I would like to know, because you try a ton of stuff, what are some of your favorite bourbons that you've had this year?
Oh, gosh. Okay, so one, and I don't think it's recency bias. As I said earlier, I do a ton of reviews for Instagram, and I also now write for Drink Hacker. So I just submitted a review to Drink Hacker yesterday actually, and I had something sent. It is a new 7-year wheated bourbon from Highwire Distilling in Charleston, South Carolina. It's their Jimmy Red wheated 7-year bourbon.
I'm very familiar.
You and Drink Hackers coming out at about a week, I guess. With the exception of the fact that the bottle is $149, this wheated bourbon is ridiculously good. If it wasn't $149, I think it would have cult status. Absolutely amazing. So I wasn't expecting Highwire in Charleston, South Carolina, to be one of the best bourbons I've had in years, but it is.
Interesting. Okay, I might need to go visit them next time I'm home. It's a little out of the way, but Charleston's one of my favorite cities in the country.
So Highwire, I like their other bourbon. This wheated bourbon is just getting ready to drop, and it's ridiculously good. So
is it a limited thing, or is it like a new label for them?
Yeah, it'll be limited.
Okay.
But if you can get your hands on it, if $149 is in your wheelhouse, I don't think you'll regret it.
Yeah, that's not I especially for me. I don't mind spending a little bit of cash on a good bottle, especially if it's really, really good. When I'm doing a review, I always like to make sure that I mention price, but I don't make it the focal point. When you're doing it, do you kind of do it that way? Do you factor it in? Do you try to go in as blind as humanly possible?
So when I'm writing my evaluation, I go about it as if price is irrelevant. Now, at the end, I may certainly make note of the price. With the recent review that I did for the Highwire, I clearly said that this bourbon is amazing, but I do think they may struggle to get a craft distillery for them to get people to pay $149 for a 7-year bourbon. And I clearly said if they would knock the price down a little bit, we have a cult following bourbon here. But what I run into is, I get a lot of stuff sent my way to sample. And I also pay attention to all the competitions and whatnot. Now, I understand the shortcomings of the awards and whatnot, but I've had bottles sent my way that won double gold in whatever competition that sell for $200. I've also had bottles sent my way that won double gold in the same competition. They were $80. And if they both are kind of in that same wheelhouse, if one's 80 and one's 200, I may make note of that. But when it comes to just overall, is this a good whiskey? I don't factor in the price, but I may make that commentary at the end.
That's a good thing. It's kind of how I do it. I kind of just drink it and then, oh, by the way, this is, well, that's not a good example because I got that at retail. I'm trying to think of a good example. I guess Russell's is probably outside of the Maker's Mark Cellar Rage. I'm so dumb. I bought a Maker's Mark Cellar Rage for like $3.50, knowing I was overpaying for it because I would have had the first video online of it, and it didn't work out.
Yeah,
but
it's tough. I don't own either bottle, but I have tried both of them.
And the first release, I think is better than the second release. I have a local friend who managed to get his hands on the second release, and he's had the first release, but he went to a local tasting bar that had it on the bar,
Mm-hmm.
and he sampled the second one and realized that while it's good, it wasn't as good as the first one, so he did choose to sell off the second one.
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not impressed with the cellar aged this year. It's unfortunate, but it's just kind of what it is. But people love it. I don't dislike it. I just feel like it was kind of I did prefer the first one as well over the second one. But Russell's 15 is just a banger.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I haven't had 15. I had one of the 13s, but I have not had the 15 yet. But the 13 was amazing, so I hope to get my hands on a sample of the 15 at some point.
I'll send you some.
Turkey, if you're listening, Wild Turkey, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, send him some, and if they don't, let me know, and I'll send you some when I send you the conviction.
All right.
I'll send you both. Anything else that's like been a highlight for you this year? Anything? Yeah. Do you have a whiskey of the year narrowed down yet?
Oh gosh. Not yet. I mean,
anything honestly, in the contender? Any like a strong contender for you?
Something that literally does jump out is, and I just released a review for Drink Hacker as well, is, make sure I get the title right, is the new Penelope Estate, Penelope Private Collection Estate 9-year. I think at $80, it is an absolute steal.
Really? I haven't opened it yet. I have one, and I'm waiting. It's going to be a review, not this coming week, but the week after that. It'll be reviewed.
Okay.
I haven't opened it yet.
So you know what it is. For those who may not yet know what this is, Penelope has made quite a name for themselves on blending MGP and blending it extremely well. Now, the new Penelope Private Select Estate 9-year is a blend of MGP and Kentucky. So, as I recall, this is the first time that Penelope has introduced Kentucky to their blending. Now, where does that come from? Well, the 2023 merger or acquisition of Luxco and MGP suddenly gives people in their portfolio access to Kentucky whiskey. I think the whiskey is extremely great. It's kind of as I described it in my review, it's a lot of your typical bourbon profile notes. They're just extremely amplified. It's kind of like a typical profile in HD. And it's only $80. So I think the quality of that bottle, given the fact that it's only $80, which, as we all know, in this current market, that's not much.
No, that's hell, dude. That's almost value bourbon at this point.
Right. Yeah, 5 years ago, $80 was expensive.
Yeah.
5 years ago, you had to think hard about dropping $80 in coin.
Yeah.
But in this current market, $80 is when it's not $80. What's wrong with it?
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
But the fact that they are only asking $80 for this level of quality, that's going to be hard to beat. If you're looking at quality price combo, that's game on right there.
That's bonkers. I can't wait to try. I've heard nothing but good things about it. I'm so excited to get my hands on it. The other bottle that I wanted to ask you about before we wrap it up here, because we're 45 minutes in, I don't want to keep you all night, and I have dinner plans with the missus downstairs, so we're going to wrap it up here shortly. But the other one I wanted to know if you've even tried. I haven't opened it yet. Actually, there's 2 bottles I wanted to get your opinion on. Three if you've had them.
Okay.
Have you tried Old Grandad 16 yet?
Not yet. No, okay. It has not shown up locally. I supposedly have a sample of the old Overholt 11-year cask drink coming from Beam, but no, I have not tried the well-aged OGD yet.
Okay. Have you had any of the Coy Hills yet for this year from Jack Daniels?
Not this year. No. Oh, yes, they did. Yes. What am I talking about? Yes, they did send it. And I
gotta get on your level, bro. I'm a Jack Daniels fanboy. I gotta get on your level. Jack Daniels, come on, bro. Send me. Let me get on that list. I love you guys. I have a whole Jack Daniels shelf in my room.
I will say that I am extremely excited to be on their PR list now. because about a year and a half ago, I took my shot at it, and the email that I got was, "We'll keep you in mind," and then that meant you'll never hear from us again.
Hey, you got a response?
I got a response.
I think they get a
Thanks for
response.
replying, but move along. But the last, I don't know. I think I've gotten 3 things from them now, through their PR company, that have been really good. They're the distillery series thing. I got the newest Coy Hill, and then I guess the 2 most recent distillery series. So I'm extremely excited about apparently being on Jack Daniel's PR mailing list now.
That's so sick. I'm such a Jack Daniel dork, bro. I love Jack Daniels so much.
So Jack Daniel's is fascinating because, you don't want to dump on Old Number 7 because it's the number 1 selling whiskey on planet Earth. But in my mind, Old Number 7 is still, it's Jack and Coke.
Exactly, 100%.
A lot of people have this idea of Jack Daniel's is a mixer of Jack and Coke. But, I mean, Dan, you get into their premium stuff, that's premium. And
yeah.
When they sit down to make a premium release, it's extremely good.
Yeah, dude. I think every year I update my top 10 of the year. I do or top 10 of all time. I do a video every year because you try new things, blah blah blah. So it's gonna be real hard for me not to put Jack Daniel's 10-year batch 2 at my number 1 all time, dude. I love that bottle, and for whatever reason, I've done blinds where for my last Patreon video I did for the patrons exclusively was I did a blind of I have all of the Jack 10 and 12s,
Okay.
all 3 batches of 10, both batches of 2. And I was able to identify the 10 out of all of those, 10-year batch 2. So I know for a fact that it is my favorite. I love it so much.
All right. I agree. So, and in fact, I honestly had this conversation with a friend last night at the Owensboro Bourbon Society meeting. So, for a while, I was serving as a brand ambassador for Pursuit Spirits, Pursuit United, the whiskey from the Bourbon Pursuit podcast. And I was doing a brand ambassador tasting of Pursuit at a local store called Barrelheads here in Owensboro. And I think it's clearly one of the 3 best American whiskey stores in the state of Kentucky. It's ridiculous. And they have a ridiculous tasting bar. And as I was there representing Pursuit, one of the patrons at the bar said, I want to get you 2 samples. So he purchased me samples off the tasting bar of the Jack 10 and the Jack 12. Went into it fully expecting the 12 to be better, but the 10 was better. I enjoyed the 12, but between the 2, give me that Jack Daniel's 10-year every day.
Dude, it
was ridiculously good.
It's so good, man. I love it so much. And the funny thing about it is, like, I'm always known in my videos for, like, I like proof. I like proof. I like the flavors that, the intensity of it that comes with high proof. That's, I think, 97 proof. Is that right? I can't see them in the dark. It's lower. But it's just done so perfectly. Like, same thing with Michter's 10-year bourbon. Like, you don't have to have something crazy high proof to be special and good. It just has to be good.
So when you bring up Michter's, I was at Owensboro Bourbon site last night. Dan McKee, master distiller of Michter's, he was our guest speaker last night. And it had been a while since I had revisited Michter's, but Dan last night, he brought their flagship bourbon, their flagship rye, brought toasted bourbon, and the 2024 Baumburgers. And,
it's so good.
At low proof, granted, they're going into the barrel at 103, so they're going into the barrel at low proof. Mm-hmm. Just, damn, that's fantastic stuff at low proof. It's exceptional.
Yeah, Baumburgers this year was unbelievable. I feel like people don't talk about it enough.
Yeah, it was a good night last night to hang out.
Sounds like it, dude.
Talk, and get to sample some really fun stuff.
That sounds amazing. I wish we had something like that in Orlando, and if we don't, then I think I might have to be the person to do it, because I think that sounds like a good time. Create what you want, right? Have you happened to have the Old Forester birthday bourbon from this year?
No.
Okay.
I missed out like everyone else in America.
I got my hands on one through a public store here. I paid $1.99 for it, so got a good deal on it. I have heard from people that I trust that it is really, really good, and then I've heard from people that I also trust that said it wasn't that great. So I haven't opened it yet. I wanted to know if you had tried it, what your opinion of it was.
Not. Okay. The only premium Old Forester I've ever gotten my hands Kroger is one of our local grocery stores.
Love Kroger. That's where I got my first early times bottled and bond. Let's go.
Okay. So a couple of years ago, I walked into the Kroger. It's essentially across the street from my house, and staring me in the face was version 3 of Old Forester 150th anniversary. Staring me right in the face. Walked into Kroger, and of course Kroger prices at MSRP. So I got Old Forester 150th anniversary, the third version at MSRP.
Let's go. That's an amazing score, dude.
And it was crazy good. Now,
they're great.
And now, in true fashion, I probably shared more of the bottle than I actually drank myself.
That's how but that's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do.
I probably gave more of it to friends than I drank myself. But that is only like premium allocated Old Forester I've ever gotten my hands on. Was that 150th anniversary third edition?
I'm looking around. I don't count 1924 as like a premium one because it's technically part of the Whiskey Row series.
That's the third series.
Yeah, I'm looking around. I don't think I have anything other than that one either. But I have had all 3 of those 150th, and those are all good. They're all fantastic. So, well, dude, I want to have you back on some other time. This was a great convo.
Okay.
I love nerding out with somebody who knows more about bourbon than me. It's a good time. This has been fantastic. The story was great with Makers, dude. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
All right.
And
Let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely, man. Anytime we have an open invitation to the show, and keep doing what you're doing. You're the shit. We all love you.
I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Thanks, brother. I'll talk to you soon, man. Have a good one.
All right. All right, have a good one.
All right, everyone. I'll talk to you guys later as well. Be safe out there, and we'll see you on the next one. Until then, cheers.